welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story coming out about the tech triad and how we're going to win out in the tech race against our most formidable adversary in that space, aka Mr. Xi Jinping, or the Chinese government. And with that, we're going to also do our daily debate, which is: do you see the next generation of warfare being won by bigger or smaller nations? I know that seems a little bit abstract, but in a world of fast moving and small cost arms being ever more present, think Ukraine, think Iran, think Hezbollah, or the Houthis in Yemen. They're just examples of my point, which is, in a world where technology is extremely accessible, are the places that are going to come up with the most advanced, large scale, most expensive things going to be the place that win, or the places that can come up with smaller devices that are more mobile and are able to still pack a small punch? I want to know your opinion. Throw it down in the comment section. I want to hear what you have to say. With that said, let's jump into our article from National Review. We were going to do one from the Daily Caller, but they blocked us out. So we're going to go to National Review, which I pay for. So with that, the headline reads, "How America Can Win the Tech Triad Race." So what actually underlies this tech triad, so to speak? You may be thinking to yourself, Alex, why do we need to be focusing on a tech triad? We need to be worried about military gear, right? Why are there more than three things to focus on? Well, the author breaks this down succinctly. Quote, "The communist China publicly revealed its nuclear triad for the first time. At a military parade, the regime showcased its impressive array of land, sea, and air launch nuclear capabilities." Now, it goes on to state, quote, "You can say this for the Chinese Communist Party. It sees the big picture. At lightning speed, it is integrating its nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, and autonomous systems." And we pulled those from two different places, but I think it actually succinctly makes the point. They are not focusing on any one technology more than the other, as any developed nation should be able to, at the same time, simultaneously cultivate lots of different technologies. China is focusing on three that this author wants to go on and make the argument that are essential to working in tandem to one another and make a deadly triad when it comes to military precision, prowess, and capabilities. Now, I think you can probably piece together these pieces pretty simply for yourself. Nuclear energy allows for large amounts of cheap energy to be produced, which means you have more energy to train AI models, to build new AI models, to place these AI models in intuitive situations and allow them to help to make systems more autonomous. That in itself, those three, and that simple breakdown, provide the pathway that the author argues that we should implement here in the United States. We're going to go into the local politics. We're going to focus on the US, but we're also going to go back and forth about why China is a threat in this case and what legs up we may have and whether or not we are actually capable of taking them on. Because when it comes to automizing processes or autonomizing processes, the Chinese aren't necessarily quite there. They've relied on a lot of large scale labor, but with shifting demographics, they're having to change how they go about producing a lot of goods, much like we have robots and car factories that work simultaneously with people on the line. China is going to have to do the exact same thing. And this sort of autonomization is not just about making it so that factories run faster, but also that drones, airplanes can run independent of human pilots. And when it comes to deep neural network research, we don't have as much out of China as we would prefer to have. In your US focused world, you see projects like DeepMind that comes out of Google. You see lots of different AI companies trying to actively pursue more intuitive intelligence, is how I would try to describe it. And you see places like Anduril making large claims that they'll be able to have drone swarms that are controlled by AI, therefore relatively autonomous and low cost AI at that, if they are able to work on some of those energy savings that they talk about and take advantage of some of the expanding infrastructure investment that the US is trying to provide. But why is China more suited to do it? That is an extremely important underlying fact that the author points out here. Quote, the United States, by contrast, will actually go back to the first part of the quote that provides the context. The country is building, this is China, building 34 nuclear reactors and plans to build nearly 200 more in a coordinated effort to produce the reliable and affordable power required for energy hungry AI models. Same goes for their consumption of hydroelectric. They're damming up major rivers that go into the Himalayas and possibly they go into other territories, Pakistan and India, in certain places, in order to harvest the energy that it can give them. They're also doing the same thing with burning coal and oil and natural gas, and they are a country that is not afraid to attack this on all fronts. In a world in which we, as the United States, have handcuffed ourselves by having sustainable growth goals, whether or not you think that's noble or not, the question is how do you still stay sustainable and get aggressive on this front? And the answer, in my mind, when I first hear it, is nuclear, solar, wind, and then also kind of loosening those handcuffs and allowing natural gas, fracking, oil, all coal, the things that had been the backbones previously, geothermal, hydrogen, all of these, tidal power. We have long coastlines. Why not use tidal power? Why not uncap our potential? Fusion is something we're actively working on. And fusion, if we were to throw all of our resources into it and it was to work, it would be even more energy output in theory that we could capture, that we would take years to get there, than a fission reaction. But do we have anything on that scale? 34 planned within the current years, 200 to come. Quote, the United States, by Congress, has approached the pillars of the Triad in a relatively scattershot way. Private American companies are leading the world in AI development, but there's no corresponding national commitment to powering it. 0 large-scale nuclear reactors are currently under construction in the U.S. That's not to exclude the companies that want to build localized nuclear reactors that can power houses, your own model. And if you could make those sort of modular, compatible / portable technologies, then of course you could take them to a data center. You could have about 15 of them. You probably power the entire thing. So it's not as though we're not pursuing anything, but on the side of state organized funding, we are most definitely nowhere near China. Then again, their entire economy is naturally integrated and or forcefully integrated, if you don't want to use the word naturally. I say naturally in that they forced it to be that way and it's naturally grown to the state that it's in now. But that precludes the ability to fail. What do I mean by that? In a structured economy where the dominoes are lined up to fall in a very particular way, and I'm not saying China doesn't leave room for things to fail. We've seen places like Evergreen, the largest real estate manufacturer, not even apartment builder, go under. And the Chinese economy has been able to survive because of their exporting to foreign markets. But how long can that strategy work? How long can they be a producer that continually floods outside markets before they're hypersaturated? Their idea is that they have to find new ways out. They have to spend that money on infrastructure in order to be able to have energy, which is the most fundamental piece of the puzzle to human prosperity. If you look at graphs of our ability to consume more energy and the relative population growth, innovation, so on and so forth, the practically exponential rate that graph goes up at follows relative trends in the ability to harness new forms of energy and put them to work. So, is that the end all be all? Alex, you're saying that there may collapse because of export controls. They've had collapses before. I'm painting a picture. I'm painting more of a Jackson Pollock or a Warhol than I am drawing a clear Bob Ross masterpiece. And I know that's a terrible analogy, but my point is to say there are more inherent risks and they cannot tolerate as much failure as the US market could. If those small nuclear reactor companies go under, if large corporations that want to invest and build nuclear projects across the US that are private companies, those can fail more without the US government necessarily than the US economy taking on the brunt of that. Now, AI is not a place where that is inherently true. We have weighted so much of our economy on AI that does bring some fears and anxieties into people's minds when looking at this battle and seeing what failure looks like economically and what it will cause down or up the stream in the economy. But I want to know your opinions. I want you to throw it down in the comment section. What do you think? Do you think China is legs ahead? Do you think that their nationalist model of internal investment and reaping the benefits of economic imperialism in other places in order to benefit their own country, will it work out for them in a closed economy where, in theory, everything is planned, and yet for every single plan that you have, there's 15 mistakes? Do you think it'll work out? Maybe it's a really biased way to ask that question. But that doesn't preclude us from also failing, doesn't preclude us from going under because we bet on the wrong thing, and it doesn't preclude us from making the same mistakes that many empires in the past have with protectionist policies that actually end up throttling and bottlenecking our capabilities. So with that said, if you want to find today's article, it'll be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Spotify, as well as the Twitter handle at your Daily Flip, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the 6 and 6 podcast, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die,